So as you guys know, there is revolt and violence in Colombia, right? And this is, of course, directly connected to Iván Duque, who is the current president. And Iván Duque was supported by the United States. His neoliberalism and, what's described as far right policies, which basically just austerity measures, global capitalism, all of that, privatization, etc. And we're just going to go through the background here really quick. So recently, as of today, Colombia had 12 wounded in shooting targeting indigenous Minga. Minga is a sort of group of a collaborative community. Like, that's the definition of that. And indigenous Minga is just a group of people that are fighting. It's like a movement. Another word for that. 12 members of an indigenous Minga were injured, at least 4 with serious bullet wounds after being shot by armed men in plain clothing on Sunday afternoon in the city of Cali, Valle de Cauca, during the 12th day of mass mobilizations. Now, Cali is the 3rd largest city of Colombia. You have Bogota, which is the capital. Then you have Medellin, which is the 2nd largest city. And then you have Cali, which is the 3rd largest city. And that's where a lot of the just unrest has been happening. And in the evening press conference, the Cauca Regional Indigenous Council, a Cauca would be like a cadre, the CRIC, or the caucus, said that at around 2:30 p.m., a bus transporting indigenous guards went to the site where an indigenous leader was being threatened with gunfire from 3 armored trucks and SUVs guarded by police. Upon the arrival of the bus, the indigenous guards and members of the community were attacked with firearms. The events were captured in numerous cell phone videos and shared on social media. So all these videos that we're going to go through, that's what was going on. And the victims, of course, were the indigenous Minga groups. They were attacked by these paramilitary groups who were dressed in civilian clothing, but many suspect that these are actual police officers that have infiltrated by dressing up as civilians. So that's what's going on right there. Now we're going to go into a little bit of an overview so far of what's been going on. The victims, of course, like I said, were part of these Minga. They were protesting and having a national strike, mobilizations since April 28th. They were doing this against the neoliberal policies of Iván Duque administration, which has refused to offer solutions for the deep structural problems affecting Colombia's working class and in the areas of health, education, work, and the economy in general. I have to point out, one of these main issues was the taxation burden was actually increasing on the working class and decreasing on the top, which is a very common problem we have all over the world. So an official press statement by the National Police in Cali falsely claimed that the police attended a call for which citizens were being attacked by a group of indigenous people. So they turned it around and say that the regular citizens were being attacked by indigenous people when it was the other way around. And that video and that the videos that were played showed indigenous people using firearms in residential areas, quote, inciting terrorism and, quote, looting houses and apartments of the neighborhood while injuring people with sharp objects. This is very familiar to how we see the two sides described, of course, and the way the media portrays it here, and, the looting and the inciting and all of that. So these claims, though, have been proved false by witnesses and the CRIC, who was unarmed, actually. And again, so the CRIC are the members of the indigenous group. They were unarmed. The mainstream media is saying that they were armed and they were the ones doing the attack. So they have denounced the former president, Álvaro Uribe, who was also a, neoliberal global capitalist type, because he had encouraged this extremism and the unrestrained use of lethal force by the police and military against demonstrators. Again, this is so similar to what's happening here. The far-right figure has used both the airwaves and social media to appeal for increased militarization and repression while promoting hate against social sectors participating in mobilization.
I just have a question about the macro of what's going on. So pretty much there's an uprising of people who want better working rights and stuff. And that's the reason why they take to the street.
Yeah.
And the repressive government that is backed by the United States, because I always talk about this all the time. Colombia is always in the top 4 of countries that receive military weapons from the United States. So therefore, it's a fugazi government. It's backed behind the United States CIA.
Right.
So what's going on is pretty much the people are getting out in the streets. They want this to do the citizens, and they're getting pushback from the repressive government saying, know your place, shut up, we're not giving you more money. And they're using a repressive type of measures with paramilitaries to push people back into submission.
Yeah, basically that's what's happening, and we're gonna go even in more detail as to why this even started. But this is just what's happened so far, right? They're making demands, and they want a guarantee for the legitimate exercise of social protest and guarantees to the work of human rights defenders and alternative media. So they're demanding now because, and I'm going to explain it, but the taxes that Duque was trying to push out were actually thrown out because of the protests. So it's not even about the taxes anymore. Now it's about, we're being attacked. Our right to protest is being suppressed, and the mainstream media is corrupt. So that's what's happening. They want demands for the alternative media.
They want the Convo Couch.
They want the Convo Couch in Colombia. Yes. Whoever the Convo Couch in Colombia is, they want to have a right to protest because there are measures that were left by the previous president, Álvaro Uribe, that just pretty much did a whole crackdown on protesters and the protesters' rights. This is all very, very similar to what we're dealing here, except that Colombians are actually getting in the streets and protesting. Just saying. And okay, so they also want to demilitarize both rural and urban areas. They want demilitarization in the way that this is happening, right? And they hold, of course, the Colombian reps responsible for the genocide against the mobilized people. So the people that are uprising, those are the ones that are getting shot, as you'll see in these videos, etc. And they want the resignation of the Ministry of Defense, the commander of the National Army, and the police, because they're saying they're directly responsible for this. So this is crazy how everything is so similar right now. There's so much unrest all over the place.
Yeah.
And then Iván Duque, of course, responded by increasing militarization, and he wanted to have the greatest deployment of capabilities and said that security forces would be lifting the road blockades. In a video statement, Duque directly addressed the CRIC, ordering the movement to abandon the sites of the protests and saying the interior minister would be contacting them to make them understand that this is not the time to generate provocations or confrontations with society. Ooh. So he wants them to go home and stop protesting, essentially.
Know your place is what he's saying. And wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this committee released a statement on Sunday night expressing willingness to hold an exploratory meeting with the government of Iván Duque. They want to meet, and they want to demand respect and guarantees for the free exercise of mobilization, etc. What we talked about, the protests, the demilitarization, etc. And they also have other social movements that are outside of the National Strike Committee who want the protracted fight against the neoliberal austerity, which will continue to be forcefully imposed by the Duque regime. So they want the resignation of him and his cabinet. So there are other groups that want more. They don't just want the protest rights. They don't just want demilitarization. They actually want him to step down and his whole cabinet to step down. Yeah. So it's not a monolith, as always, right?
It's also, I think we have to point out the importance of neoliberalism, which is an austerity measure when it puts it right on the people and the rich stay richer. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It puts the burden of the state and lets the IMF hold contracts and whatnot over these countries. And you, the people, or we, the people in this situation, have to live with these neoliberal austerity measures. And they're no bueno. All right, because everybody should pay their fair share, and they're actually fighting for workers' rights over here more than anything. At the end of the day, that's what we all have in common. So
exactly, and we'll get into that how the United States has used Colombia as it's basically just the DEA, like the Peruvian a guy who was running for office, like his representative said, like it's the largest drug cartel in the world, and the United States has been exploiting Colombia in that regard. So on a national level, at least 1,876 cases of violence by security forces have been recorded. And this is by En de Paz and Temblores, including 963 arbitrary detentions of demonstrators, 278 victims of physical violence, and 12 victims of sexual violence, among other instances of brutality and human rights violations. Meanwhile, there have been more than 500 reported cases of missing persons nationally since April 28th. This is only since April 28th. That's like a little over a week. Like this is a lot.
2 weeks. It's 2 weeks.
Like, yeah, now it's almost 2 weeks, but that's like
500 reported cases.
Thinking we're like,
come on, fam. It's $250 a week.
Yeah, that's
give it
nothing.
take. I know guys who did 300 a week. Please.
Okay, so basically, they're talking about, they're really upset about the attacks, the paramilitary attacks that have resulted in killings of hundreds of social leaders, campesinos, peace signatories since Duque came to power. Much of the rural area violence is linked to drug trafficking, which continues to climb as Colombia tightens its partnership with the United States, both politically and militarily. The United States government considers Colombia its firmest ally in Latin America. Of
course it does.
Dedicating nearly $12 billion in, quote, aid to Colombia between 2020 and 2020. In 2020, $10 billion of which was dedicated to Plan Colombia, a program which by all measures dramatically increased drug production rather than reducing it. See, that money didn't go where it was supposed to go, is basically the point. So last year, the number of massacres skyrocketed as a consequence of the surge of paramilitarism. So again, guys, like the United States has a hand in this. The United States is funding the drug cartel. Basically, the United States has their drug cartel in there, and it's increasing drug production. Why do you think that is? Because there is a profit to be made at the expense of the global South. Yeah. So that's just like the big picture rundown of what's happening.
Yeah. So I just want to say we're going to get into these videos right now, and this is nothing new. Okay, we talked about the way Freeway Rick Ross. You know what I'm saying? How the CIA actually took drugs and put them into the streets of LA so they can make money to buy guns to send them over there. You know what I'm saying? To fight the Sandinistas at the time. They were back in the Contra. So this has always been something that's going on. But it's not just about making that money off that sweet nose candy. It's also the fact that then they get big contracts to sell weapons to the Colombians or give them aid and whatnot. So as we look through these videos, I want you to pay attention to the weapons, the military hard gear, the guns and stuff. That's our aid that we're talking about. Yeah. And it's just a cycle of death. You get drugs, you get weapons, and that's the whole game. And it's costing us the taxpayer money instead of, helping ourselves back at home. We're funding these right-wing crazy militia governments to the T so they can just perpetuate these crazy wars. And the elites and all the people in the military-industrial complex and the CIA, they're making money hand over fist.
And if you want to talk about MMT, then if it's not real money, it's the excuse of having real money. Yeah. Of like throwing all our money in that, right? Because that's what they use. They say, well, we don't have money for education. We don't have money for healthcare. How are we going to pay for it? But this is never an issue when it comes to war. So on May 9th, there, let's go ahead and see Erica Guevara's status. Did I put it here? There it is. So she said, Barrio Meléndez en Cali esta noche después de la visible militarización. So she's talking about in Cali, there was a militarization in the city and that all the world's eyes are on Colombia. Your obligation is to put an end to the repression and violence and protect all of the people of Colombia from the violence of the paramilitary, of the armed militia. So here's just the video. If we can just play some of the video.
Los estamos pidiendo apoyo, por favor, que bajen, que nos apoyen. Siendo hoy 9 de mayo a las 10:30 llegaron, están atacando, nos están jalando.
She's saying that they were attacking them. So, just like what we described, right? There's military militias. Okay, and now in the next one, we have Ivan Cepeda Castro.
Is that the right one? He's on a different one. Let me make sure.
Okay.
Check the thing real quick for you. I'm sorry. All right, yeah, you are on the right one, Ivan.
Ivan Cepeda Castro is the next one.
Yep, he's got it.
Okay.
La gente en Ciudad Jardín ya no quiere copiar de nada, quiere que todo el mundo vaya allá, aquí, ya, no copia.
So as you can see, they're dressed holding weapons.
Ya la gente en Ciudad Jardín ya no quiere copiar de nada, quiere que todo el mundo vaya allá,
neighborhoods, that's a residential area.
That's the aid That's the
Ya la gente en
age.
Ciudad Jardín ya no quiere
It's in their
copiarte y
hands.
nada.
Okay.
Quiere que todo el mundo
So-
vaya allá, aquí, ya. No copia.
And fam, would you imagine? I mean, I know we don't know for sure, but would you imagine with the fact that we arm Colombia to the T when it comes to the paramilitary groups and the government, that the government would tell the United States, "Don't worry, we'll shut this down quickly, fastly, and rapidly because we won't let you see like people demanding workers' rights in the streets. We'll shut that down."
Right. Like this, are you kidding me? We can't do this. Like we couldn't like have protests because I mean, I think something similar could happen, you know, like in the United States where you would have the armed militias,
Yeah, well,
depending on
citizens
whatever
armed,
side you're
right?
in. Like that's to be decided because I think some of the armed militias would actually side with the people over the government based on what I've seen out there in my coverage. Our coverage of the protests and the militias and all that stuff. Okay, so this is another one, Natalia y punto. Pilas a este hijo de videos de paramilitares. Okay, so these are just a segment of paramilitary videos where you can see the guys in the car and he has a gun and they're like literally just shooting.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's
Can
insane.
you imagine just being in the streets and paramilitaries working through and
Yeah.
with guns and shit and stuff?
Really saddens me because I was talking to my aunt like last time I visited. My aunt's Colombian, and we were like saying we should go to Colombia. We're not going to Colombia anytime soon. Bad.
What are they saying?
It's hard to put it in context because it doesn't. Basically, they're saying that they're being attacked. He's calling him. You understand that part?
I understood that.
It's the videos are of the paramilitaries themselves, so you know what I mean. So there's like this civil war happening, and he mentions this is guerra civil.
Was he part of the paramilitary, that dude right there? Or was that dude fighting the paramilitaries?
He had a gun. I understood that he was a paramilitary. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
segment of videos that they posted. So this is the Consejo Regional Indígena del Cauca. This is the organization we were just talking about. And it is not us because, again, the mainstream narrative is that it's them fighting the people, but it's civilians with arms that are actually attacking them. So that's what needs to be understood here if you want to understand what's going on. They're saying here that the police have infiltrated the civilians and dressed in civilian clothing to push chaos in the government in Colombia, making people believe that there is a conflict between the society and the indigenous Cauca members. So
Gotcha.
they're saying that these are infiltrators put in there to stow division.
Yeah.
Like that's what they're saying. So you can play the video now.
Is there volume on this one or no volume?
There should be, but it's just like a woman, you know, she's like screaming.
I want you to translate.
So they're coming in.
Están aquí en la esquina, la gente.
And you can see the guy over there in the corner, he's shooting.
Which guy?
The guy in the white.
Aquí es mi amor.
Yeah, he's shooting. And then you'll hear the woman screaming in the background because it's like, it's crazy. And then they're saying that these people are infiltrating the community to sow division. Now, the next one I have is Dan Cohen posted a video, right, saying today in Cali, paramilitaries protected by police opened fire on unarmed protesters from a group known as the Indigenous Guard. Several injuries, no reported deaths. Here's one of the numerous videos of the attack. Again, this is a group of the paramilitary who are now protected by the police opening fire on these protesters. The narrative in the mainstream is the opposite. So let's play the video.
La policía está disparando, la policía está disparando. La policía está disparando.
The police is shooting. The police are shooting.
La policía está disparando.
The police are shooting. That's what he's saying over and over again.
La policía dispara la minga, la policía.
The police is shooting. The police is shooting at the Minga, which is the indigenous group that's part of the movement that's uprising.
La policía dispara la minga, la policía está.
So these videos contradict the mainstream media narrative that these indigenous groups are the ones firing, and that's what they're trying to dispel by pushing these videos to try to show like how the police and the paramilitaries are working together, which is why they believe that the police are actually dressed as civilians, but they're actually police, and they're doing that.
So you're saying the police not only serve the state in the United States, but they do the same thing in the government in the government of Colombia too as well?
Yes. The police are being used by the government to infiltrate, sow division, cause chaos, and turn the people against each other.
Where
basically
could we possibly see a scene, maybe, I don't know, them stretching over here like, we saw in Bolivia, or was it Ecuador when the military turned on the police?
That was Bolivia.
That was Bolivia?
Yeah.
Could we possibly see a scene? Where's the FARC? Have we heard anything from the FARC in this thing? I know they retreated into the jungle. Are they right now out of this whole situation?
I haven't heard anything about the FARC, which is really weird. Yeah, I mean, I'll look into it more.
And let's see. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing I wanted to focus on is why this started, right? Why did this protest start? Well, they started on April 28th. They were mainly in opposition to what I mentioned is now this shelved tax reform. It was called a tax reform that benefited the 1%, though. Colombians took to the streets to oppose the tax reform. The government argued that the reform was key to mitigating Colombia's economic crisis. Its gross domestic product, the GDP, dropped by 6.8% last year, the deepest crash in half a century. And the coronavirus pandemic, of course, has further driven up its unemployment rate. So that's why they started protesting initially. So why are people still protesting if the tax reform is now shelved? Well, even though Duque announced that he would withdraw the tax reform, the protest continued, and the umbrella group which called for last week's protest has convened a fresh nationwide strike for Wednesday, May 12th. So the next big protest is going to be May 12th, this coming Wednesday, saying that the withdrawal of the tax reform was not enough and that they also want improvements to Colombia's pension, health, and education system. Gee, that seems like a logical solution. But many of those who have been taken to the streets since the president announced his U-turn on the tax reform said that they were angry at the use of force by security forces. More than 800 people, of course, are reported to have been injured in clashes between police and demonstrators. So that's just they
poked the bear, fam.
Yeah, so now people are pissed.
Now they should go for more, and after that they should go to take the government out and get somebody else new in there if that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, that's what they want, actually. Some of them. So again, just to reiterate, because foreign policy is always so complex and hard to understand, here are some bullet points. As of April 28th, tens of thousands of Colombians took to the streets to protest a government tax reform, demanding the right-wing government of President Iván Duque Márquez to withdraw his proposal. At least 19 people were killed, with one being a 9th grader. Hundreds have been injured and detained at the hands of police.
Oz, it's the first tweet Lily read in RT, Bryce Ray, the 4 pictures.
Yeah, it was that thread.
With the 4 tweets, the thread.
The pictures with the 4.
You're on the second tweet with the other one. There it is. All right, so the first one, as of April 28th.
2021, tens of thousands of Colombians took to the streets to protest the government tax reform, demanding that Duque's government withdraw the proposal, which they did. Then 19 people were killed, with one of them being a 9th grader. And then the tax proposal, which has now been withdrawn, was originally aimed to, and this is why they were pissed, right? The tax proposal was aimed to raise around 6.3 billion, eliminate deductions and exemptions, expand taxes on individuals and businesses, apply sales tax to more products, increase taxes on low and middle income citizens. So it wasn't just the working class too. The middle class actually joined in the protests because they were affected and were already struggling for what happened with the coronavirus. So the unions who organized the protest also said the tax reform would disproportionately impact low income and working class people who were already struggling financially in the pandemic. The government insisted that the reform was vital in mitigating Colombia's economic crisis, like we said, which was, I don't understand how raising taxes.
Well, maybe if they just
took
some money instead of weapons all the time for the United States and actually use it towards the people, they wouldn't have to have these austerity measures. And it's always the poor people, the working class.
Why don't you
people.
take it from the 1% of the
rich.
country?
Yeah.
Okay. So this tweet to that: due to continuing protests, deaths, and international condemnation of illegal human rights abuses against protesters by police, the government budged and withdrew the tax proposal, as we said, right? And then the next one is, but of course, like we mentioned, the protests are still going on. The government took too long to rescind the tax proposal, leaving Colombians on the streets to protest the way the government has run the country for 2.5 years. This didn't just start now. This has been an ongoing issue in Colombia. And this is a quote from Natalia Arevalo, who's 29 and is a protester in Bogota. They have pushed us to hunger, is what she said. So that's just a recap of really everything we just talked about. And the last thing I wanted to point out is this addendum by Isabella on the thread. She's Colombian. She said, not only is the tax reform, there are 3 more reforms and they only removed 1. There are 3 reforms that affect us. Apart from this, the president gave an order to kill the young people who are protesting yesterday. There was a massacre and they killed more than 30 young people. They blocked our networks to not publish anything, and that people do not realize it. Our new newscast report what is convenient for them. So again, the mainstream media in that country is lying to them. Again,
seems like a lot like what's going on over here. Like they're asking for alternative media.
They are, and so there was the tweet there. I just wanted to show on the map. It basically shows the net blocks, right? This was a net blocks report of the situation yesterday, so you guys can see the real network data showed internet.
He has that. If you go up a little bit, if you scroll through that a little bit, Oz, you'll get the net blocks one. It's under the Isabella one.
It's under the second subtweet in that.
Under the reply, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if he can't get it.
No, he can't get it.
Okay, that's fine. So it's just basically this chart that shows the network data was disrupted in Cali, Colombia, and that the protesters were pretty much their internet was blocked, and you can see that it was done on purpose. This is nothing new. Yeah. They do this all the time. They did it during January 6th. They did it all throughout the BLM protests. This is something it always happens, right?
Yeah, no big deal, Oz. Don't worry. We don't need to get it up, buddy.
Yeah. I just wanted to point
just
that
showing
out.
that they zap the internet. Yeah. They do this all the time. It's something common that they do. We saw the jammers in January 6th. We couldn't even get in there and go, hey, man, we can't even do our jobs over here. That's why Johnny immediately shut down the live stream after about 10 minutes of bullshit, went to taping it and going on. Well, they're doing the same thing over there, so nobody can live stream the incident in real time. And they do this quite often. They do it in America. They do it in Colombia. They do it all over the place.